Hello everyone! Time to talk about December, what I read, what I didn't read. I hope I'm not the only one who had just such a crazy end of the year that things really got pushed off with reading, and I definitely did not get all of these read. But we're going to talk about what I did read and why I DNF'd what I DNF'd. Honestly, you can blame Hanya Yanagihara because A Little Life, I started it in November, but it took so long for me to read. That took up, honestly, probably the first 10 days of December, and I was just reading A Little Life. So you live and you learn. But it had to happen. It had to happen at some point. Like, I just had to know which side I was on with the whole Little Life drama. So I'm glad I did it, no regrets, but it did put a kink in things. So as far as what I did read, I'll start off with Tinfoil Butterfly by Rachel Eve Moulton, and this was very surprising. I am not a horror reader. What I have tried I didn't like. I don't like gore at all, and I generally want escapism with my books in a positive way. So it's not for me, but I found this. I don't remember exactly who it was who talked about this book. I just remember that I was surprised they were recommending a horror book because they didn't really like horror either. And they said that this book just knocked their socks off, so I thought I would give it a go. It's short. It's about 250 pages. We follow Emma, our protagonist, who starts out in a car with a guy, which is already just weird. That already sounds like a horror film to me. Basically, she ends up with a broken down car in the middle of nowhere, and the only person she comes across is a young boy named Earl. But we don't know that because Earl is just a mysterious, creepy kid wearing a tinfoil mask who leads her away. This book really explores gender identity pretty heavily, which I did not see coming. In a horror book, it's just not what I was expecting, but it was done really well. This mostly takes place, if you want to feel out the vibes, it mostly takes place in sort of an abandoned, not even town. I would call it maybe like a village, just a few buildings, kind of in the middle of nowhere in an area that's not easily accessible by car, especially in the wintertime. So it's like snowy, outdoor, woodsy, abandoned vibes, and a weird guy in a lawn chair. It did have me pretty confused in the way that I want to be confused in either horror or thriller books for pretty much the whole time until, we were supposed to start understanding. And that is a huge thing for me because honestly, it's harder to find than you would think. So many thrillers and horrors are kind of easy to guess. So I appreciated that quite a lot. It's super easy to read. Like, it's really nice writing, but it's not something you have to really kind of wade through. It's very fast to read this book. I think I would give this about 4 stars. It was really good and I enjoyed it the whole way through, but it's not one that I really think about now. I kind of forget about it. 5 stars to me has to be like, you feel it in your soul. I would really recommend this one if you're generally not a horror reader, but you want to give it a try, because this is not gory. It's really not. I feel like there's enough other layers going on that it feels like a book that kind of bleeds into multiple genres. So I liked it a lot and I do recommend it. Ooh, I just found my missing bookmark. Does anybody else have like good bookmarks that are your pretty ones that you're really careful with and you use those first? And then if you're reading more than 2 books at a time, you'll start using like sticky notes. Well, apparently I got to page 34. I feel bad about this one. This one I like so far, but I really wanted to get the TBR done for December, and I was so excited about those books that I didn't finish this. I was rushing at the end to try to finish this in November, and yeah, I only got to page 34 just because of time. So it's just going back on the shelf until the next TBR that I can fit it into, because so far so good. This is a thriller about men going missing, young men going missing on a college campus, and then women appearing that look an awfully lot like those men. And you get right into it. Like, I'm 34 pages in, but I already know a lot more than I figured I would have known at that point. So I'm a fan of that. It makes me wonder how much is going to happen in the remaining 350 pages because a lot has already gone on, which is my kind of book. So I really am excited to finish this one. Next is Elsewhere by Alexis Schaitken. Schaitken? Schaitken. I'm very sorry. I don't know how to say this. There you are. I'm really conflicted about this one. So this is very, very literary up until I got to page 30. It's only like 220 pages. Up until that point, there's hardly any dialogue. It's just a lot of somebody thinking their thoughts, and I don't dislike that, but for me to latch on to that way of storytelling, there has to be, I don't know, there has to be a lot of dynamics in some other way, or there has to be a lot that's happening. I don't do well with like really slow-paced, lackadaisical books. I have bad ADD. I just can't do it. Which is funny because If an Egyptian Cannot Speak English is one of my favorite books of all time, and it's very much similar in that sense. But what she's saying in that book, like, there are so many just mic drops in every page that's what holds my focus. This one, I feel like isn't quite so potent with the points that it's making. I really like it so far. Aside from that, it is making points and I really like what it's talking about. I'm not sure if I'm going to finish it or not. So I basically paused this one. I couldn't decide if I was ever going to go back to it or I just wanted to permanently DNF it, and I still am torn. So it's just kind of going to hang out in limbo land on the bookshelf until I figure that out. But this is about a very secluded town in the middle of the mountain somewhere, and they don't really see people from outside their town. It's very, very secluded. And mothers, after they have their children, most of them end up disappearing after some time. And it's like a slow process. Like, apparently you can kind of see them start to fade. And it's just the way things are in their mind. Like, when they grow up and as soon as they have a baby, they start to, look in the mirror constantly to see if their reflection is fading and all these things. And little girls play games where they hide because they've disappeared, and it's super bizarre. But it's really fascinating. It's talking about losing your identity as an individual after you become a mother and how that can just kind of consume you. And I think that is an amazing thing to write about. That is so necessary, which is why I want to get myself to finish this. I think maybe I'll have to do it in little chunks between other books or something, because I don't want to DNF this, because I appreciate what this book is saying so much. And the writing is beautiful. It's not keeping my focus for some reason. But if you're happy with slow-paced literary fiction, you should definitely pick it up, because it's really, really good. It's just, its writing style and my ADD are having some compatibility issues. Should we do the obligatory, I have a cat and I have a YouTube, so I have to hold you up in front of the camera? This is Hendrix, grumpy boy. All right, goodbye. Next, we have The Goblin Emperor by Katherine Addison. This was a lot of fun. So it's not what I thought it was going to be at all, but it's what I've been wanting. I got this without knowing much about it. I put this on my list of books that I wanted to order many moons ago, like when I was first getting on Bookstagram, and this is just a book that is very much loved by the fantasy community, but not like TikTok fantasy. Like old school fantasy readers that know the deep cuts. They like this book a lot, which is always the most intriguing recommendation to me, is the nerds. I listen to the nerds because they're usually right. So I had no idea what this is about, just fantasy. It's court intrigue. It is juicy, dramatic court intrigue and backstabbing and conniving rich little snobs, and it's a lot of fun. It's longish. It's about 450 pages. I would give this I think I would give this 4 stars. I had a lot of fun reading it. It's very difficult with the names. There's a whole index in the front that's like insane. It's one of those worlds where there's a whole different name added on to the end of your name if you are a married woman versus a single woman, which this is a female author and she still wrote that for the women but not the men, and maybe she did that for accuracy. Maybe that's how it was somewhere back in the day. It did feel a little weird. Like, the men don't have that rule with the names, only the women. I was like, why do we have to focus on whether the women are, like, up for grabs or not? But just me being petty, maybe. Oh, here's a tangent I've actually really been wanting to go off on. I am noticing that a lot of authors really love to overuse the word wince. The amount of times this man winced is unreal. like actually unrealistic. I never want to see that word again after reading this book, but what am I reading now? What did I just finish? Oh, yeah, one of the books I just finished used that word a lot too. It was driving me nuts, so I'm just extremely sensitive to the word wince now. So that was one part I didn't enjoy. It got so bad, I'm telling you. It sounds like I'm being dramatic. It was pretty bad, but yeah, the names are very, very confusing. It makes it really difficult to get into. Fortunately, the drama was good enough that I just kind of read through and I was like, if I'm confused, I'm confused. I'm not going to spend my time getting hung up on it because you just can't. And if you do that, you just kind of keep reading and ignoring the difficulty of the names, you will mostly understand what's going on. Like 95%, 90%. Enough to follow along. So this is basically boy is fourth in line for the throne and is hidden away because he is not loved by his father and nobody thinks he's ever going to be heir to the throne, and then of course he becomes heir to the throne very suddenly. Immediately you can tell that people are just trying to steal the throne and think that he has no idea what he's doing because he hasn't been at court. He comes in and they're all underestimating him. And this book is about him standing his ground and trying to keep the throne and how everybody is two-faced. And it's basically just about a really, really good guy surrounded by almost entirely shady people and how he navigates that and how he navigates being plunged into a completely foreign and very cold world when he's feeling very alone and how that affects him. It's honestly not the most fantastical book. I mean, yes, there are legitimate goblins in here, but there's not much that's very fantastical aside from that. So if you're wanting the strongest fantasy vibes in a book, this is not the one. If you like fantasy that's smushed in with other good stuff like court intrigue and drama, this is great. Slade House by David Mitchell. I was really, really pumped for this one. I tried it on audiobook and I actually DNF'd it probably a third of the way through. It wasn't bad. It was an interesting concept and I am curious how it would have turned out. It was a little bit quirkier than what I was expecting and what I wanted at the time. And I'm sure it would have felt a little bit different if I was reading it, but not that much. So this is very much like, you know, those British narrators that are just like super over the top and like kind of sound like they're reading a children's book, which is not a bad thing at all. It's just not what I was wanting with this book. Like, I didn't think this was going to feel so young and it's like crazy stuff is happening, but the vibes are very goofy. Yeah. And that's not what I was expecting, and it was really not what I wanted. So I DNF'd it, and I'm just not quite motivated enough to finish it as the physical book, honestly, because, yeah, I was just going for something different, that's all. But basically, it's about Slade House, which is just an address in a town in England that I can't remember. Maybe it's London, maybe it's not. But every 9 years, somebody gets invited to this house, and then they disappear. So it's about people who disappear there, what's going on. I'm sure somebody tries to get out or something eventually. It sounded really cool, and so there are tons of people who would love this book. It just wasn't for me right now. And very briefly, Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. I said I was going to read this one in my hopefuls video, so I'm just letting you know I changed my mind. I kind of just read the first couple pages and I was like, you know, this is not the type of book I want. I don't want like a sweet, cozy, wholesome book right now. I just don't. Not even to the point where I want to postpone it. I think I'm just going to donate it. So I didn't read it. There are reasons. The one, the only, the behemoth, A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. I have a whole video on this, so I will keep it as brief as you can with this book. She is 15, 17 pages. Very small typeset. And very deep, intense, heavy stuff. So it's a very slow read. I did a lot of highlighting. Made me think things and made me feel things. I don't know how to rate this book. I don't think I ever will. I'm not even gonna try. I have mixed feelings about it. I'm really happy that I read it. so that I can understand the controversy around it and the cult followers and the haters. I understand all of it. I think if you have read this book or are thinking about reading this book, it's a good idea to pair it with interviews with the author, because there are a lot of things that I didn't like until I heard her speak about them and the reason behind them, and then I actually did like them. So, but there are also things that I feel like she did very, very wrong with this book that just didn't make sense to me. The things that she did well sometimes didn't make sense with the things that she didn't do well. And so I'm kind of confused by some of her decisions in how she wrote this book. But basically, people say it's a book about 4 friends. I don't really agree with that description. We mostly follow Jude, and he does start out living with his 3 friends, Willem, JB, and Malcolm. But I would say Jude is the main character and Willem is probably the second biggest character. And the story is about severe trauma and how some people don't make it past their trauma. Some people don't get better. Some people don't go on to sort through their bullshit and lead a very, very happy life. Some people just have to be okay being okay-ish and making it through. And that's what Hanya wanted to write about. That's what she did. And it doesn't sit well with some people. And there is so much that you should read about with trigger warnings before reading this book. This is the only book where I've ever had to just set it down and finish a chapter later, because it was just too much fine detail about extremely unpleasant things. And that's another thing that I didn't always love. Sometimes I feel like she went into so much detail with some of the trauma in this that it wasn't contributing to the story necessarily, but it is what it is. Everybody has opinions about this book. You cannot read this book without having an opinion on it. You absolutely can't. I promise. I read it because I wanted to see what the big fuss was about with all the drama. I'm very happy I did. It was so worth it to me. I'm super proud of myself for reading that book because I was scared of it big time. That's definitely the longest and heaviest book that I've ever read. But we watched Jude's life is really what happens. It's not focused around one event or anything. We're just seeing how his childhood just kind of impacts his whole adult life and all the ups and downs. And it also is very intensely exploring the topic of how someone's baggage and trauma can affect the relationships in their life and what it is like for the people on the other side of that. And it definitely re-examines what friendship is, what love is, and the norms of how to deal with those relationships versus the people that say screw the norms. I think if you read this book and you read reactions to it, you will learn a lot. It's been very interesting for me looking at opposite reactions from the same group of people, and it's just so interesting. This book proves the point of that quote, you don't see the world how it is, you see it how you are. The reaction to this book proves that quote more strongly than any book I've seen. So I think it's a good read if you look through the trigger warnings and you decide, yes, it's okay for me and I think it is worth it, but it is a lot. So you really should look into that before you read it. Okay, audiobooks. Oh, I did 3 audiobooks. Oh, look at me go. Okay, The God of the Woods by Liz Moore is the first one that I listened to. And I think this book was a lot of fun. I'm not obsessed with it the way everybody else is. I think I gave it 3.5 stars. Do I agree with that? I'm torn between 3.5 and 4 stars. The writing is really good. It's cool to see more literary writing in a thriller. I loved that, and that got me thinking that I want to find more books that do that, so I owe that to this book. There were too many points of view for me and way too many red herrings. I was kind of irritated. Like, some were just super obviously trying to throw you off the scent, and it just got to be too many, one after the other, and I was like, okay, I get it. You want to make this hard to figure out. I understand. But can we focus a little bit? Because what does this have to do with anything? And this is not a flaw with the book. This is just a personal preference. I don't love reading books about rich people feeling bad about the problems that they created themselves by being obsessed with being rich. And that's kind of what this is. But to be fair, there is sort of an offset to that point in the book as well. And that was brilliant. So it's like the point overall I enjoyed, but like the amount of bougie mindset that you have to read through to get to that point, if you really hate reading about that, is, you know, not super fun. But the vibes were really fun. I mean, campy. I actually wish more books were written at like campsites or out in the woods. That's becoming a thing for me. I can't even think of what else I've read in that setting, except, I mean, Tinfoil Butterfly. But yeah, like campy, woodsy settings, I think they're starting to get me. So if you know of any good books in that setting, please let me know in the comments. This was 14 and a half hours. I think the narration was pretty good. I'm so picky about women trying to do men's voices and vice versa, and adult trying to do children's voices. I really wish they would just hire another voice actor to do the other roles, because it ruins so many audiobooks for me. So yeah, some of the narration was a little rough, but it is what it is. Overall, super easy to listen to, super easy to get into, but there's a lot of like, there's so many things happening. Where is this going? Like, what is the coherent direction of this? Because it's just branching off all the time so much. So yeah, like 3.5 stars for me. But I think I'm the only person I've heard of who doesn't really love this book, so to be fair. Then I listened to Kitchen Confidential by Anthony Bourdain, the one and only. This was so fun to listen to, obviously. Like, he's just fun to listen to because he is not trying to be politically correct, even though he is like very aware. He's very aware of things like that, but he's still gonna say his opinion. He'll acknowledge that it's messed up, but he's still gonna say it. And I find him to be just so intelligent and entertaining and interesting, and yeah, he's just sort of a curiosity. But I miss New York so much, so hearing about him in all the different neighborhoods in New York was just so wholesome for me. It's not the book to read if you're looking for like a no reservations vibe. Like, this is about his years when he was still working in kitchens, and that was the only thing he was doing. So there's a lot of name dropping of different chefs that he worked with. He does educate you on the culinary industry, but there are also sections where you're probably not going to follow what he's saying unless you work in that industry and know at least some of those restaurants and chefs that he's talking about, which I didn't mind at all. I kind of just wanted to hear him talk and hear the way he thinks, no matter if I could follow or not. And I got that for 8.5 hours. I was really happy with it. The last audiobook I listened to was Orbital by Samantha Harvey. This one I need to go back to at a different time. I think what I'm discovering is I am not in the mood for literary books right now that are more about just someone's random thoughts versus plot. I think I need at least a decent amount of plot right now. And this one is kind of low on the plot. I absolutely adore the writing. Like, I understand why this book is such a big deal. The writing is beautiful. Like, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. And I honestly think, even though the audiobook was really good, the narration is great in this. Who did the narration? Let me see. Sarah Naudi. I think that's how you say it, but I could always be wrong. She was a narrator and she did a wonderful job. She was lovely to listen to. Yeah, it's absolutely stunning. Absolutely stunning. I highlighted many sections in this book because I was just... the wording that she chose, she could make anything sound beautiful. She could straight up make anything sound gorgeous. She can romanticize like nobody's business, and I love that. But yes, y'all know my ADD sometimes just has these phases where even if I want to obsess over something like this, which I do because it is so gorgeous, I just can't focus on it very well right now. Like, I need sort of like action books, I guess, and I have to learn to be okay with going with that flow because I can't fight my ADD. It doesn't work. But I'm gonna come back to this. I think I'm gonna order a physical copy so that I can highlight the heck out of it, and I will. Like, I have a feeling when I'm done with this book, it will probably be my most highlighted book ever, just because of her writing. We are following 6 astronauts who are in orbit in space and just their day-to-day lives. And it's talking about how being in space for months at a time affects the human psyche, because it's not a natural existence, obviously, and it's a huge deal, obviously, and it's very isolated. There are so many things about it that are so unnatural, and it's really interesting to hear the things that each of the character thinks about when they are just orbiting around the Earth and are completely detached from their loved ones and from a normal existence. I think it's an amazing idea for the book. I think it was executed perfectly, and I'm happy that it's been winning so many prizes, because I think it deserves every single one of them. 4 stars on the audiobook. I honestly probably shouldn't give it 4 stars because it's a me thing, but I have a feeling that I will give the physical book 5 stars. I'm really excited to reread it. I really am. That is everything I got through and didn't get through in December. I'm doing a bunch of big chunky books and a few novellas for January, and that's going really well so far. I have a new favorite thriller, and it's a movie, so I'm gonna watch that tonight. But let me know what you guys are reading. I think I'm gonna skip my book of the month video because it was A Little Life, and I already did a video on A Little Life, but I really want to make some very clear 2025 reading goals, not as far as numbers, but as far as intention and what I want to learn and what I want to explore. So I think I'm going to do a video about that instead of book of the month, because I don't need to talk about A Little Life twice. But that's it for today. Happy New Year's, everybody. I'll see you in the next video.